Bravo. It is 8:32. We'll go ahead and get started with our Citrus Connection LAMTD board meeting this morning. Good morning, June 9th already.
I know.
How did that happen? First item of approval on our agenda is the May meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor or any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Aye. That's 3 of us. Does that count?
Yes, we have one.
3 out of 5.
Awesome. All right, next on the agenda is public comments. If we have anyone from the public who would like to come and state their name at the podium and make any comments, please do so now. Okay, but we are going to introduce our interns now, right, Tom?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we have interns this summer, and we're really excited to have them here at Citrus Connection. I'm just going to introduce them one by one. When I say your name, would you go up to stand up where you are and say your name and what school you go to and kind of what year you are and what you're interested in. And the first one is Courtney Salmon.
Hi, my name is Courtney Salmon. I go to McKeel and I'm going to be a senior this year, and I'm interested in the law field. I want to be a civil rights lawyer.
Awesome. You want them to go ahead and stand up after they.
Sure. Yep, right over there, and then we're gonna get a group photo when we're all done.
Awesome. All right, Tiaja Myrick is next.
I am Tiaja Myrick. I recently graduated from George Jenkins, and I'm going to school to be an RN.
Yay, good work. Carlton Howard.
Hi, I'm Carlton Howard. I recently graduated from Polk State Collegiate High School, and I'm planning on going into computer science.
Caleb Walker.
I'm Caleb Walker. I'm going to my senior year at Lee Gibson, and I'm interested in engineering.
Okay. Carly Flagler.
Hi, I'm Carly Flagler. I'm actually going to USF, not in high school. I'm majoring in political science, public administration, and environment studies.
Awesome. Jimmy Blizzard.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Blizzard. I'm homeschooled, and I enjoy working with computers.
Great. And then we have one intern who's absent, Noah Young, but we're so glad you guys are here. I got to meet them on their first day Monday morning and say hello. You want to take a picture real quick?
Yes.
And we're just excited you're learning about public transit and public administration.
Just interesting. Pretend like we like each other.
Yeah.
Can I take your mask off?
Yes, if you guys are comfortable. Yeah.
And maybe we're gonna have to tilt shoulders a little bit, guys.
Yeah, there we go. That's it. Thank you for that. You all got to look a little happier than that, though.
Remember, the internships are paid. Everybody gets paid.
All right.
Thanks, sir.
All right. We're down to item number 3 on our agenda, the Summer of Safety video.
Hello, greetings to all of you. This is Neil Moore with the Citrus Connection, and I welcome you to the beginning of Summer of Safety. Citrus Connection and New Beginnings High School have partnered together to bring all of the middle school and high school youth Summer Safety program offered to all middle school and high school students. You can pick up your tickets at your school sites or at our main offices or at one of our convenient hubs within the Citrus Connection boundaries. This will operate beginning Monday, June 7th, and will continue until August 6th, which is the week before school returns. Our hope is to encourage all of you to participate and to be able to get around town, whether you are going to work, whether you're going swimming, whether you're going on a date, whether you're going grocery shopping or shopping. This allows you the freedom to do what you'd like to do all summer long. Now remember, this year high school seniors and our high school members are able to continue on with our COLS program after Summer of Safety is through. So many thanks again to the New Beginnings High School for their gracious sponsorship and partnership for this wonderful program that we are able to offer to you all. Don't let summer pass you by. Get on the bus, hop on, and be part of the Citrus Connection.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil. And thank you to Ashley Wright at New Beginnings.
There's a part.
Oh, so sorry.
We wanted to add both of them together.
So summer safety is amazing. Summer safety allows young people to go wherever they need to go throughout the summer. It's extremely important for our kids because we know that an idle mind is not the healthiest thing for our young people. And so we're going to be able to have the opportunity to jump on the Citrus Connection, take our public transit all across our county. It allows them not only to commute to and from work, but also to be able to go to different activities that are available throughout the summer, but we know that they are safe. And so we really, really value our investment and commitment to summer safety because of the opportunities it provides to young people in the community. So to the drivers of the Citrus Connection, I say thank you. If it wasn't for your commitment, the impact that you make daily, sometimes a man's life is worthwhile living, and it hasn't impacted the life of another. By the words of Jackie Robinson, thank you, bus drivers, for impacting the lives of my young people and this entire community by making the commitment every day to get them from point A to point B. We appreciate you. So it's a beautiful thing for our young people to be able to have access to public transit. I think that it doesn't just benefit our students, but it impacts their homes as well. So it's a beautiful opportunity because a lot of our young people are also of an age where mom can say, hey, can you go run down to the city of Lakeland and be able to pay this light bill for me? So it allows for a lot of transportation issues to no longer be a hindrance. We are all throughout the county. And so because of our unique geographical locations and because of how we're centered with our schools to be able to service our kids throughout the county, as they migrate from campus to campus and they move throughout whole county, we know that we will always be able to get them service to and from school because they have access to the Citrus Connection. The kids at New Beginnings High School have really benefited from summer safety because through our partnership with Citrus Connection, it allows them to be able to come to school throughout the summer if they want to continue to work on their educational goals for the year. But in addition to that, a lot of our population also works. And so instead of them having the responsibility of trying to figure out how they're going to get to work as well as school in the summer, that allows them the benefits of being able to do that. And again, take advantage of different opportunities like this beautiful park here in the city during the summer.
And Chair, as a reminder, we have a multi-year contract with New Beginnings High School. So this is something we don't have to revisit year after year. I believe Commissioner Lindsay had asked us to try to find a multi-year sponsor. So we're very excited about it. This is the last year. So if you see Ashley Wright, please let her know how much we appreciate that.
Absolutely.
We'll approach New Beginnings again.
Yes, sir. You track,
Oh, Commissioner Walker's son, or Commissioner Lindsay.
you track riders numbers.
We do. We track the Summer of Safety numbers as well as the New Beginnings High School and the traditional Colts program as well, and report those numbers. Right now, the New Beginnings High School students are far outpacing the 25,000 public Colts high school students, which, as you know, Board Member Allen is acutely aware of and is working with us to try to increase that Colts ridership. When we started the Colts program the first year, they dwarfed New Beginnings High School. So we're working with the high school as well, yes, but we track all that. And I believe that Ashley Wright knows the value that it provides. And hopefully with Board Member Allen and the work that Neil and his team are doing with the administration, I believe that there is an opportunity to at least have a middle school pilot program with the public schools possibly this coming year or maybe possibly next.
What does the sponsorship cost for the summer?
$2,500.
That's good.
Because again, the public school Colts program, which dropped summer for a while, now includes the summers again.
Oh, good. Yeah, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think we think about history and how we began this particular project is because of what was happening here in our city several years back with gang violence. And you recall when we began the gang task force, and we started having the roundtable discussions and all, and we knew we were heading into the summer. when the young folks be out of school and just have more free time on their hand. And of course, at the time, Citrus Connection, of course, in partnering with us, the city of Lakeland, as well as the sheriff's department, we came up with this. Well, they came up with the summer safety kind of initiative, and the city of Lakeland part had it happening. I think we did it for 2 summers.
Yes, sir.
maybe, was
It was 2 summers with Lakeland,
and then we went
then
to
Lakeland, Winter Haven,
right,
then Grady,
right in Grady,
County,
okay, mhm.
and then from Grady, it went to New Beginnings.
And it's proven to be very successful.
Sorry, I said, what year did we start it?
That was 15, 14, might have been 14.
I think-
Gang violence started by
I believe
13,
the gang
14.
violence was the summer
Yeah.
of 14.
That's what I thought, because we were at Pulp Fiction.
Mhm.
Yes.
So it's been doing very well, I believe.
Yes.
I believe it has.
I think the sweet spot, as we all know, is those middle school students because they're getting their personal freedoms, but they don't have access yet to a personal use vehicle.
Thank you. And thanks to staff. Those were great videos and very informative. So thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on now to number 4, Mr. Prasad for finance report.
Thank you and good morning.
Good morning.
We have our monthly financial reports for the board, starting with Lakeland Transit. The financial statements are to April, which is 58% of the fiscal year. Looking at revenues, year-to-date budget 6.5 million, and the actual is 7.7. That's because we have realized 99% of the ad valorem taxes, or 5.1 million. Looking at fare box revenues, we are now seeing a positive trend in both ridership and the revenues, so that's a good sign. And we are starting to draw down the FDOT and the FTA grants. Those are our major revenues and pretty much in line with the budget. On the expense side, year-to-date expenses 5.8 million, or 90% of the budget, under budget. Looking at the major expenses, salaries and fringe benefits, which makes up 66% of the budget, is under 10%. And that's to some extent attributed to the COVID and declining ridership. Other major expenses, fuel is in line with the budget, under, and parts, material, and supplies. Overall, for the year-to-date fiscal year, revenues are over expenses by almost 2 million, or 58%. And again, that's attributed to the ad valorem taxes. So both revenues and expenses are within the budget, no overrun so far. Any questions?
We can move on.
Okay, the next financial statement is for the Polk County contract agreement for transit services. Looking at all the revenues year to date, again, budgeted revenues 4.7 million, actual revenues 4.1, or 88%. Expenses 4.6 million, actual expenses 4.1 million, 87%. So except for the fare revenues, consistent with LAMTD, which is not 39% year to date, all the revenues are basically following the same trend as previous years. The grants match was given in advance by the county to ensure cash flow and to draw the grants down. All the expenses are within the budget except for contract expenses, and that's for the East County services. Those are funded by grants. So while there is a slight deviation from the budget, those expenses are covered.
Any questions for Mr. Prasad? All right.
Thank you. And then the final information report is for the Transportation Disadvantage Program, which is a state program funded by 90% from the state and 10% from the county. Year-to-date revenues, 79%. Year-to-date expenses, 79%. The only expense that is pretty much at 100% is labor cost. And discussion, Marcia. Darcy. We still continue to provide those services even though with the COVID environment, but there's no expectation that we're going to be over the budget. Again, these are fully reimbursed and no obligation to the district.
Any question on transportation disadvantage? Okay, we have 2 items, D and E, for approval. So if we want to move on to those.
Then we have the next item is to approve the transportation disadvantage budget. This budget is a different fiscal year, July 1 through June 30th, 2022. The total budget is 1.3 million. And again, 90% is funded by the state and 10% by the county grants match. I do want to bring to your attention that the allocation for the next fiscal year is 167,000 less than the current fiscal year. However, I want to let you know that the expenses for last year was 1.2 million. So there may be some correlation that the funding level for next fiscal year is based on the current year, the last fiscal year experience. Given those scenarios, we will be looking at the budget very closely to ensure there's no overrun. Because if there's any overrun, the district will have to absorb those overruns. And there's a corresponding resolution to go with the budget for the state.
Questions, Commissioner Lindsay?
That's the TV budget. If there's an overrun,
Then, yeah.
Correct. And our contract with the county, as you know, requires that any budget overruns are brought to the attention of the county immediately. Whereas in years prior, there was a true up at the end of the year.
Right.
So we would make you aware of that earlier, just like we would make you aware of any, Roger, through the process, makes you aware of any additional grant opportunities that would require a match that are outside of what we have in the budget.
have you communicated that, Todd Bond, yet?
Yes.
We are in the county proposed budget, we have enough to cover the match. But as we go through the fiscal year next year, we will monitor it closely and let them know.
I don't see any reluctance to meet any shortfall. It's just sooner you know the better.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Totally.
Got to know.
The good news is the county's exposure is only 10%,
Yes.
or 160,000
And
in
one,
total.
and one of the, and this could be covered under executive director report, but as we've seen transitions in municipal staff, especially in our smaller municipalities like Fort Meade, where they've had almost not only a turnover of the city manager, but 100% of their senior staff. Aaron and I are starting to change the language that we've used the last 7 years with the cities, recognizing that we've largely talked about the fair shares in 20%, 20%, 20%. We don't want to move too far off that because everyone's comfortable with that. However, there is a recognition that they are paying 20% of the actual cost of only the fixed route service. The county is still covering 100% of the cost of the municipal ADA services and 100% of the local match for TD. That's not to say that we as staff are recommending to the county or the Citrus Connection Board that we change that methodology. However, by bringing it to the staff's attention, we have found that they truly understand there's even more value there in what the county has set as that 20% than what we've been saying. So we've started to put a price tag, commissioners, especially county commissioners, to this is para, and David can break down what we're spending in para, and this is what we're spending in TD in your community that you're also getting gratis. And so I think that's going to help us moving forward. Everyone's COVID rich right now, or CARES rich right now, but that will come to an end. So.
Yes,
Yes, it will.
Well, and I think them understanding exactly what they're getting is it's like 2 for 1,
yes.
really, for their skin in the game. It's just one piece of a very big puzzle.
Chair, I think the next conversation that possibly Bill Beasley and Marcia and I should have is making a recommendation to the county commission that if we're going to move the dials, maybe we don't move the 20% dial, but we move the dial of covering 20% of all the actual costs so that we can continue to use that 20% that everyone's comfortable with and help them understand that there's dials within that we can continue to move as well.
Yeah.
That was just,
Not for this budget cycle.
yeah, but I mean, it would cover the TD and all that kind of stuff moving forward.
Correct.
Right.
Bring more services
Right.
into the formula.
Yeah.
Commissioner Walker, right now, saying, another way to say it, less politically correct, would be to say that we've said you're covering 20% of your costs. Staff has said that to many commissions.
Yes,
You're not.
They're not.
right.
They're
right.
covering 20% of fixed route costs.
Yeah.
Not all costs.
Correct. So
Yes.
that might be a dial that we move in the future.
Sure.
Recommend that the county, if the county wants us to move it, we move to a true 20% dial rather than
Right.
asking them to go to 24% or 23% or something like that.
Yes, Commissioner Walker.
Well, it might be sidebar because you brought up a city and I know Ms. Aaron and I've had the conversation of late about Fort Meade and what's going on. I know New Beginnings has a school there and I know they're doing that. What is going with the New Beginnings school there, but when I brought that, I approached the subject to Sam.
The mayor?
Yeah, and I was asking him about, services and all, and he's, I think, positive about one, make sure they have it, but trying to make sure, of course, his fellow colleagues are buying as well. I was wondering, how's that going? How's that?
Their new city manager is amazing. He's he's good. So he's on board. He thinks that there may be one commissioner, and we know which commissioner it is that's not on board at all, but he happens to own a car dealership, so we get it. So he thinks he can bring, and he's even asked us to look at what it would cost. So we brought them down by half. He's even asked us to add another route back during the day. So he's their new city manager's great.
Well, good.
He's married to a Polk County.
So that's
Like bringing talent back by marriage. That's awesome.
good news. Thank you. Need a motion?
Yes, we need a motion.
To approve.
Thank you. And a second by Mr. Lindsay. Any discussion? Other further questions? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. All right, Mr. Prasad, you have another item.
And then the last item is the disposition of 2 county vehicles for paratransit. One was acquired in 2012 with a 5-year expectancy. It's 8 years old and has also exceeded the mileage. The next vehicle is a 2009. And now it's over 9 years old with the expected mileage over the useful life. Based on FTA regulations, we're gonna auction these vehicles. We need approval.
All right,
Move approval of staff recommendation.
we have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor, or any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Prasad. Moving on to item 5A.
Commissioners, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I have several items, a couple items for approval or for discussion. The first item, respectfully seeking your approval on, is updating our employee handbook bereavement policy to match the collective bargaining agreement bereavement policy. They are somewhat different. Both of these documents were approved in 2020. The collective bargaining agreement allows for, in some circumstances, up to 5 days of bereavement for what would be considered more direct family members. Extended family members get 3 days of bereavement. The current existing employee non-bargaining unit bereavement only allows for 3 days of bereavement, regardless of the relationship, be it a spouse, a child, or a parent.
Commissioners, I will give just a bit of background for this, especially Commissioner Santiago, since you were not here. This is our 4th collective bargaining agreement with the TWU 525. And Commissioner Santiago, the board has had a prior boards have had a long-standing policy of directing me to bring parity to non-financial items for anything that we negotiate with the union, so that the union and non-union employees, bargaining unit and non-bargaining employees have the same benefits as much as possible. This was an oversight. Again, this particular union agreement was approved at the county retreat. I'm sorry, at the Citrus Connection retreat. And I should have had a corresponding agenda item to bring this bereavement policy into line with that. So I'd like to thank Ruby in our safety and security department. Unfortunately, she had lost a covered employee and was seeking that 2 extra days. And she brought it to my attention that this was not brought to parity for administrative employees. So that's why we're seeking to bring parity to this.
Thank you for that clarity. Any questions?
Move approval of the staff recommendation.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
All right, thank you. Second agenda item is updating the employee handbook weapons policy. In this particular situation, nothing tests a policy like reality. And what we found last year, this policy went into effect, and we actually had a situation that emerged out of it, which caused us to look at the policy again and run it through our legal. Legal has since, in all considerations to match it to Florida state law, suggested that we consider this as a updated policy. Effectively, it's really not much substantively different.
You said no difference?
Well, it basically refers to state law.
Okay.
Respecting the state law. We didn't really have that built into language before.
All right.
And there are some state laws that allow certain circumstances for properly stored firearms to be on property under those circumstances, and that matches it to this. Before, we said it was totally prohibited.
So we're, again, bringing it in line with what the state law
Yes.
requires to support. Okay.
We were being overly restrictive
Right.
regarding our parking lot.
Okay.
That was not compliant with state law.
Does the policy have a provision that it automatically conforms to state law, so we don't have to go through this each time? So it's automatically compliant without there being a period of out of compliance until we take action?
It does reference in the provisions of the Florida state statute.
As amended from time to time.
Which could be amended from time to time, but I can't really answer.
We can take that back to Laura Papard, our employment attorney, and ask that the board, pending the board approval, we add that we reference the state statute, that it can't be changed from time to time.
I would think it would.
So do we need to do a motion to amend the language, or do we?
Yes, we would need a motion, correct, to amend the language to include from time to time, or yes, compliant with state
To
law.
be
Okay.
consistently
Consistently.
compliant with state,
Compliant.
immediately
So not a
compliant.
period of out of compliance.
Disparity.
We don't want out of compliance.
All right, so do I have a motion, Mr. Lindsay, to?
So move, adopt the policy with the provision of automatic updates with compliance with state law.
Second.
And a second?
And there may be wording to that effect. I have not seen that agreement. The other attorney is handling this, but it may say that, but we'll clarify that.
Let's really make sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be great.
That would be an easy fix.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? Thank you, Mr. Lindsay, for bringing that up. Commissioner Lindsay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, item carries. Thank you for making that provision and getting that lined up with the state of Florida.
Thank you. My final agenda item is just more of an update on the bifurcated benefit plan. We've been evaluating that. We've done some internal reviews. Sean and his finance team have looked at what that might look like to improve wages through and keep things budget neutral. Establishing another health insurance plan. On my side, we've also validated that the Affordable Care Act provisions are in alignment. So we are continuing to move in that direction, and this seems to be very solid as a potential option to improve wages without impacting the budget. Didn't know if there was any questions on that.
And just, I think our executive director has shared with you as board members, but just to remind everyone that this was one of our 7 target areas in the strategic plan to make sure wages and benefits are competitive. And that's why we started talking about this. And staff has done a really good job pulling all of this together. So I think the questions for us are, do you want to continue down this path? Do we want, I know that Ms. Prasad told me last week, it's financially revenue neutral.
Yes, it's a break-even point.
It's a break-even point. And then also staff has Dr. Ross on standby to do an employee survey if we wanted to do that, to see what the feeling is among the employees.
Yes, Chair. So next step, what Steve has told us the plan may look like is, as you know, right now, we provide free healthcare to the employee through a Cigna Open Access PPO, what I would call a absolute Cadillac plan. And we also cover 70% of the dependent care coverage. The starting wage for a trainee is just under $15 an hour. And then after they complete training, they move up. Now, Commissioner Lindsay, I know you've asked for a completely different methodology when it comes to how we negotiate with the union rather than having pennies per year.
Yes.
You wanted more steps. Heard, and we need to still address your question, and our entire staff is doing that. What this would allow us to do in the meantime is say, we are offering a bargain basement healthcare plan with something between a $7,000 to $14,000 deductible. So truly a catastrophic only healthcare plan. But if you chose that plan, it would still be free for the employee, but dependent care coverage would no longer be subsidized because David needs that money to make it budgetarily neutral. However, commissioners and chair, your starting wage would be bumped up $2 an hour. So choose your rate when you come in and choose your healthcare plan. Of course, all of the existing Citrus Connection employees would have the opportunity to do that as well. Our feeling, at least among senior staff, is that most will stay where they are. To have Dr. Ross do a survey, and the chair very specifically wants to make sure that as part of that survey, and Dr. Ross is ready to say, these are what your plans would look like, so that people can see the stark differences. There would be a 9 to 11 question survey. There would be 2 surveys, one for the unionized workforce, one for the non-unionized workforce. And we'd ask them, is this something that you would like us to explore? And then we'd bring that back to you as a board to let you know what the results are. The cost of the survey with Dr. Ross is
about $1,200.
Is under $2,000 to proceed to the next step. If we get to the next step and the board wants us to look at this, then of course there's the implications of just because we can do something, should we do something? Because the chair has met with senior staff and we've discussed that we could be solving one problem and creating another. Are people enticed by the higher wages and the lower health care?
The hook of a deductible.
The hook of a
Right.
deductible,
Yes.
or
Who's got $7,000?
absolutely. Or I start off and I'm young and I'm single, and then I get married and want to have children, and now I have to leave the Citrus Connection because I can't afford to have a child. Does this have, do people look at their spouses? There's lots of questions. And so I think that there are ethical implications and possibly unintended consequences. But as the leader of the organization, I'd like to at least see what the employees think of this while we're continuing to work on the other initiatives within TA7, like how do we negotiate the union contract. And Mr. Prasad and Mr. Dunn are looking at the CARES funding and how we may be able to utilize that for operator wages. But the healthcare is a lever that I think in the 10 years I've been here, we've all said is something that needs to be discussed. And I don't want to speak for the mayor, but I know the mayor was shocked that we still subsidize dependent care coverage at 70%. And that is a fantastic legacy that we have for our existing employees. But to be competitive in the outside market may be something that we can't, that we want to look at. How much money is tied up in our benefits with employees that we have not yet hired yet? And does that wage make us competitive? So I think there's a lot of questions here.
There are a lot of questions. And however many categories of employees, job descriptions you have, 30 or 40, from clerks to mechanics to drivers. Some are competitive and some are not. And I don't think we can afford either the cost of a system-wide pay plan or an implementation thereafter. But there has to be some recognition that 2 or 3 or 4 categories are so out of whack, they need to get back in whack. So we need to
get back in line.
So I think that's where the focus needs to be.
Now,
Yes, sir.
what, as you're going through this study, as you're going through you're making sure that you're exploring the bifurcation process and all, and we find, I guess as you initially said, it's going to be revenue neutral, but we find that the cost would be more, we'll bring it to us, I'm sure you need it, will we not? Or you think you won't even?
I think, I know we would bring to you any,
right.
If it's not revenue neutral, we would bring it to your attention immediately.
May I address that? We normally have our health insurance premium before the budget is presented to the board. So any change in the cost of the insurance upward will have to be addressed at a budgetary time with board approval.
Sure. Okay, sure.
And Commissioner, as you know from selling insurance, that any qualifying event and or open enrollment every year would still give the employee the ability to change.
Right,
As we talked with the chair,
Yeah.
taking that $2 pay cut is probably unlikely. Mr. Dunn says it's going to be a choose your rate, choose your fate.
Right.
Because typically if you pick that low plan, it's going to be very, very difficult to
Yeah.
take the pay cut needed to go to the high plan.
Yes, you grow the size of your tank. Oscar.
Yeah.
All right, other questions or comments, Mr.?
I was just saying, work that need to be done.
So I'm hearing proceed with at least the survey, or
I think it's Pandora's box, but I'm willing to go along with the majority.
I think, you know, if we find usefulness in this staff, you know your staff. You find that we need to make sure that they understand these things, understand what
The choices,
results,
yeah.
you know, will affect, how it must affect them and their pocketbook too as well. So they need to make sure there's clarification there and they understand it as you go through the process.
Well, and we had a discussion too, that if and when this moves forward, that they would have, the insurance people would have people on site to meet individually with people to really
Sure.
clarify and communicate what you're getting for what you're paying for. And that's been my big suggestion to staff, is the communication piece of this is really vital. Mr., I think Steve had something.
Yeah, and we've done that quite a bit internally. As far as, we do a renewal every year with our current existing health insurance. And our renewals have where other places have experienced larger, ours have been about 3% each year. And we've been able to, in some cases, expand benefits. So we've done that because we've encouraged our employees to do some of the preventative things that are required, that help make the insurance company feel better that there's not going to be, a lot of strokes or massive heart attacks or people, having catastrophic health situations.
Just leadership.
So, I mean, they still occur, but not at a high rate.
Right.
But because we have our folks doing these checks and we're communicating frequently with them and helping them through some of their benefit decisions.
Well, I think too, like you said, Madam Chair, the communication piece is there.
Yeah.
You know, and make sure they understand what the different situations may be and how it affects them.
And remember, we're an organization, we provide free gym memberships to
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah.
Can't make it work out, but we can offer.
Because my experience is those who are healthy will continue to be healthy, those who are not will continue to be not.
Right.
We're not going to change habits from those who are not. So, the other direction.
So do we have consensus that we want to continue to move forward and looking into this?
Moving forward would be moving forward
Just
with
the
a
survey.
study. With
Yeah.
survey and things like
the
that.
next step would be the survey and the results.
Yeah. Okay.
Everybody good with that?
I'm
Okay. That's not an approval item, so it's just more of a discussion.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Now we're moving on to 6, fleet management with Mr. Steinbauer. Did I say that right, Jay?
Morning.
Hey, we're looking to approve the addition of 3 admin vehicles. 2 will be for our Chevy Equinoxes. They're gonna be in the finance department and the marketing department. They've had an increase in activity in those 2 departments, so they're gonna require 2 new vehicles. The other one is for parts, which is fleet maintenance, and that one is a Ford cargo van. The total on the 3 vehicles is $84,000, and there's funding in the capital improvement budget. Questions?
Any questions or comments?
Why don't we just give them the vans that we're going to dispose of? I'm being facetious.
They don't work.
Current
I'm glad you had that caveat.
Using parts is actually 10 years old.
It had a 4-year life, 100,000 miles.
Yeah, he's.
We've got 10 years.
You're good, Jay.
He was joking. He was joking.
I just, it's another, we always go.
All right, we have a motion to approve with staff recommendation.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion or commentary? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. The motion carries. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Appreciate it. Mr. Darby.
Yes. First item actually is a proposed resolution 21-11 relating to the request for addition of land owned by Boone Distributors on South Pipkin Road as a part of the Parkway Corporate Center. As you know, the process involves the owner requesting to be included in the district pursuant to a requirement of the city of Lakeland as a part of a development. The owner requests to be included. The district here considers a resolution for the land to be included, and if the inclusion is approved, then the city of Lakeland passes an ordinance for the inclusion of the land in the transit district. And so that's the process. And so as we have discussed before, that it's not required that this board approve of the inclusion. If the land is included, it's obviously subject to the ad valorem tax, and transit service would be provided to the additional land as transit service is provided in all the other areas of the district. In other words, there's no guarantee that you'll have a bus coming to your door once your land is included. Right. So that's the proposed resolution 21-11. And there's a depiction, there's a map that is, I see Commissioner Walker. Oh, okay. Depicting the location of the land, which Chuck Barmby has provided.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Walker.
And this is a sidebar again, but unless you want a motion first.
Let's go ahead and do a motion and then we'll have discussion.
Move approval of staff recommendation.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion, Commissioner Walker.
Hearing, knowing what's getting ready to happen in that area.
Yeah.
And traffic that's going to be affected in that area with all the new roundabout that's coming into that area and that core with, and the wiring is on one, I think on the east end.
This is Pipkin.
Yep.
Are you thinking Drainfield?
It's not Drainfield area, close to Drainfield?
Yes.
I thought it was.
Oh, wait. I see
Yeah.
now. Sorry.
And you got wiring on the east.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. And I know we just went through all that without discussions. Have you all looked at how it's going to affect, I guess, the transit stops and
I'm going to defer to the route whisperer. Mr. Dunn?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I kind of missed half and trying to catch up. I'm not trying to understand the question.
It's about the
About the
roundabout
routing.
at Drainfield and Airport, right?
Yeah, Drainfield.
Oh, the intersection of Airport Road and Drainfield?
Yes.
Yes,
And
and
the effect it was going to have with transit stops, because we talk about many months of construction and.
Yes, there's a couple things working in that area that will coincide. And talking with Chuck at the city, we have a two-phase plan to service the area. Right now, what's being developed is a major transit stop at the intersection. We actually only started serving this area from Reroute 2020. We serve it southbound down Airport Road. Very, very complicated situation because it then meets up with the Publix area. It's all on the red line. You cannot serve it north, I apologize, south on County Line Road because that's Hillsborough County. So we're in a situation now where we're using Airport Road both ways. What's happening in conjunction with this is the extension of Waring Road, that starts at Waring Road on Parkway frontage will circumnavigate the intersection where the roundabout will be. That project is well under construction, is what we will utilize in order to get around the roundabout until such time that it's complete.
Well, I guess as all this moves along, I guess my thought is passengers and ridership, knowing as time moves on, your stop may be affected here, but it's going to be here. All is going to be done, I guess, in time.
That's a great question. And really, what you're asking, it is the main reason why we're taking a two-phase approach. What's going to eventually happen is we're going to have to split the red line into two separate routes because of just exactly what you're saying. These trip generators that are out there are going to be, they're going to dictate that we can't keep it serviced with one route. What we're using as threshold is ridership count and on-time percentage. Those will be the two decision-making factors when we go to phase two.
And Commissioner, in the meantime, our government and community relations and outreach department make sure through our social media and the push notifications through My Stop Mobile that folks know well in advance of any route changes or modifications. And Dave's gotten great at integrating with our municipal partners, not just at the city of Lakeland, but at the county and other municipalities, that we can push out any unexpected route changes to the app. And there will be an additional push for the app, as you know, with the squeeze, because 100% of that payment is going to be used on our other app. So we're really trying to push people to the mobile app, because that's where they can get that most up-to-date information pushed out to them.
I apologize. I interrupted you. I apologize for that. I want to go back to, were you asking too about the traffic impacts on Pipkin when that construction's going on?
Well, I was concerned about how navigation would be to make sure we have a ridership available to still know where to come and where to be as this construction is on.
That will be through our social media accounts and Facebook postings and push notifications. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Are there any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, Mr. Darby, now we're on to Riverstone.
Next item is a proposed funding agreement between the district and the developer of the Riverstone residential development. In 2018, the city of Lakeland entered into a development agreement with the developer, which was Atlantic Property Company LLC, under which development agreement the developer would be obligated to pay the district $500,000 over 5 years. The first payment was to be made upon the issuance of building permits for the first 421 single-family units. That happened sooner than expected. I think on December the 18th that happened. And so pursuant to the development agreement, there was an escrow agreement under which the amounts toward payment of the $500,000 would be deposited. The escrow agent is Richard Strawn, an attorney in Winter Haven. I was informed, and I think others were also, that the total amount of $500,000 had been deposited with the escrow agent. We have been communicating with Rennie Heath, who actually represents the developer. There's some clarification. Rennie's been very cooperative. There needs to be some clarification, though, as to who needs to sign this funding agreement. What happened was not to go too far into the weeds here, but the original development agreement indicated that Atlantic Property Company LLC was the developer, but then it was written in on the signature lines that it should have been Riverstone LLC. So there was confusion as to who needed to sign. Riverstone LLC should have been the party to the initial development agreement. Atlantic Property Company LLC is the manager of Riverstone LLC, and J.D. Alexander is the manager of Atlantic Property Company. There are documents, George understands this. There are documents that indicate that Rennie is the manager of Atlantic Property Company. All that having been said, I think it's appropriate, based on what Rennie, he sent me an email last evening, and he indicates, and I agree with him, that and it's okay. I mean, we need to get J.D. Alexander to sign this funding agreement. That's okay. But then I've been emailing on business, honestly, with Rennie, actually, and asked him, well, are you in a position, if JD needs to sign the funding agreement, are you in a position to approve of the agreement? And he said, yes, he would approve it. So I'll change the signature line so JD would sign it. And I'll also change the provision that indicates that the $500,000 has been paid. It apparently hasn't been paid. So I'll clarify that. So once I do that, then I'll transmit that to Rennie Heath, who can approve of it, and then JD will sign it. So really, this escrow agreement really just amounts to the third step in the process to authorize the escrow agent to pay us the first $100,000. The next 4 payments will be made. The anniversary dates for those would be on December the 18th of 21, 22, 23, and 24. That's what this really just authorizes the escrow agent. And also there's a provision in this funding agreement that says that the parties, the district and Riverstone LLC, would execute any documents required to authorize the escrow agent to release the funds, the $100,000 payments to the district. Now, the issue that was focused on related to what service is the district obligated to provide for this $500,000. I have drafted this funding agreement just based on the wording in the development agreement, which is general in terms, which I think benefits both parties because nobody knows for sure what's going to happen in the next 5 years or beyond that. So it can go both ways. In other words, and so that's basically what was decided by staff at the district, was to say that. In other words, there was not a description of exactly.
So what does $500,000 pay for?
Pay for you.
We don't know.
That's the point. And so that's just the point. Now, staff can describe this better than I can, but out in that area, there's going to be transit service as long as there's a transit district. So it's not a situation where you have a development out someplace that you're going to have to provide new service to. There's going to be a bus out in that area anyway. So, and this would just be for operations. That issue also came up during the email.
Operations, what happens when the $500,000 expires?
That's the question.
Now you're in the district and you're paying the village.
Right.
Does that pick up?
So, Commissioner Lindsay, if I may, we can refer back to Mr. Dunn to talk about how we're going to service this particular property. And maybe, Aaron, before you talk, I'd like to say that one of the things that we'll be developing this summer with the help of one of our interns is formalizing this process of these developer agreements. As you know, this is our second major developer agreement. The first was Ramco, where we had a very specific set of services.
Right, and they acquired a physical asset.
As well, correct.
So, and there was the asset and the described service.
Correct. And then
which later was modified based on use and demand.
Correct. And what we ended up doing, as you know, in Reroute 2020 was when the funding ran out, we just folded it into the blue line. So there was no service cut.
It just
fell under a different, became part of the blue line.
Became all the transit service.
The two exceptions, which you may be thinking of, which David and I discussed yesterday, were the success that we had with Geico.
Yes.
Where we were expanding into an area, very specifically, here are the routes, hours, what you're going to pay for.
But that was a contracted relationship directly with Geico and the district. Here, what we're seeing is the city, independent of LAMTD, imposing these things on the development, which I characterize as a ransom note. Pay $500,000 or you don't go forward. Services to be defined at some future date. And when you've got that much at risk, you do whatever the hell you got to do to keep the project going. And it literally is a ransom for services yet to be defined, assets yet to be defined, and just pay and everybody feels good.
So
I would it rather be a Ramco type agreement, but that's beyond our scope. But this is just bureaucracy run amok, in my opinion.
So just to confirm, the wording in the funding agreement, if approved by the developer, is that the developer and the district commit to implementing a transit route that addresses the area transportation deficiencies and improves frequencies on existing routes. That's it.
Aaron, can you talk a little bit about the service? Just I think it may help.
Kind of back to Mr. Lindsay's question. So where this came from, the idea is really a city planner methodology, which I am not one.
I rest my case.
What they did was They basically carbon copied the Ramco Birkin contract and they put it in the P&Z zoning requirements. We received notification of that with a question that we received. was
Did you ask for that provision or was it?
No, we just
So
received
it
notification
was,
that.
it was included without your request, knowledge, or consent.
Right, which is different than other scenarios where we interact with this, which is more of a kind of a what it is per cost. For example, the VA is developing something upcoming. Not a similar situation. How much does it cost to get here? And that's very specific about how we explain to them the hours, the times, and the cost. And then it's kind of negotiated, for lack of a better term. But to answer the question, the idea behind that methodology, again, I don't give any credence because I have no experience with it. I will say that the idea is that after the 4 to 5 year time period, their thinking is that then the tax revenues increase because of the new developed area, and then it's offset. All I know is this, taking over here when Ramco Birkin went away, we were able to remove enough inefficiencies to keep the service 5 years later. I'm not going to tell you that that's definitely what we'll be able to do here or any other time. I just wanted to answer your question. What's the idea and how does it work?
So what is the $500,000? You're going to do a study and track it and?
Much simpler than that, Commissioner.
And much less than 500,000.
I would think that it would be, indeed. In this case, we kind of knew, and interestingly, Geico is right across the street from this development.
Yeah.
So too is the brand new Publix that was annexed, I think last year, on the intersection of county line there. So we kind of knew prior to reroute, we knew this stuff was coming, and kind of started to set ourselves up that way because of that. Now that definitely represented a cost to the district to be able to start to work our way out there, but we had no choice. It all interacts with itself, and as we talked about reroute, it's one of the things we discussed is like what this really does is solidify service for areas. It's not an accordion anymore. It's much more difficult to move it out. We had to put some plans in advance for it. For this place, it's about 12 minutes of time per trip, times 15 times a day. So that's how much time at our revenue, our cost will be our true cost. I don't have that calculation prepared now, but in real life, what does that mean? That means we come off of West Pitkin, we go about 1.5 miles, and we come back. And it also means about 1.5 miles return of the bus that we will utilize the Publix property to come back around the outside to return back the opposite direction. Again, because of the county line, I can't travel south. Sorry for all. I don't mean to be so convoluted in my answer, but it's pretty simple service for us.
Commissioner Walker.
Well, I'm trying to make sure that if I'm hearing what has been discussed, are we saying when the initial contract was even done, there was no given, no one from Citrus Connection was involved with the planning?
We were asked, in fact, we researched it just yesterday, Tom and I. It was an email from Tom and I from, I can't remember the group. One of the names probably Mr. Darby was saying there. And they just asked us, in order to provide services out here, we have this stipulation that we have to pay you guys. Do you need operating or do you need capital? So we took a pause. We looked into it. I realized because everything we'd established beforehand, we're not going to need another bus for this. So we told them we would need operating, not capital. Having no idea the stipulations of the amount of money already put on.
His question was, were you in consultation with the city when that condition was imposed?
No. I think
it was a done deal, I think.
We're nibbling around the edges of a very specific question.
Yeah, where?
There is an opportunity for Citrus Connection and the city staff to integrate much earlier.
Yeah.
In the process.
Because we are finding out the discussions are occurring and then transit is
on the end, on the back end.
On I wouldn't say on the back.
Almost like it's
yes, on the back end. So that's something that we can work with Sean and his staff to make sure that at the infancy.
Where did $500,000 come from?
The city.
Carbon copied from the Rancho Gertie contract language.
So just language that came from another contract?
Yes, sir.
At the P&Z, whatever that, I know nothing about that process, but it happened at a P&Z approval. Once the meeting was done, we got a notification and a question.
So
is this the first time this has ever happened where they request this kind of money and without any,
The most equal example was the Ramco, which is a shopping center, 98 north of the interstate, new shopping center. And as a condition of their approval and their moving forward, they had to make some contributions to Citrus Connection. They actually bought one or two buses.
One bus.
One bus, paid for it. Here's your bus. And then they had to subsidize a route for
3 years?
5 years.
5 years.
5 years. And once,
They had transit
So they
stops
had
inside the shuttle, so.
specific-
yes,
Yeah.
by the bus,
Request.
here's the route. And that was.
But that was
it.
what Commissioner Lindsay's getting to, is the city of Lakeland mandated that. That didn't come through a discussion with Citrus Connection,
That's
correct?
Correct.
Right.
Right. So it lands in the lap of the transit authority after the city already puts it in play into a contract. So then to qualify the number, what I think you're getting at is that to qualify the number is we're not really qualifying that number of $500,000 because we didn't come to the people who pay for it, which is the transit authority in the forefront. It's all reactionary at the end. And so then the developer's on the hook for $500,000 and there's really no proof of what that does
What
for
did you
anything
get out of it?
because it hasn't been trued up from a Citrus Connection standpoint. Am I getting that right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
There's actually 3 of these, for
Oh,
for
yeah.
more information that will be upcoming.
Come up, more to come?
Yes, but you asked Commissioner Lindsay if this is the only one. Well, this is the first one. I think this is the city's first attempt at this. The next 2 relate to the VA development project and then Orlando Health. Those 2 went much differently than this. This is my opinion, but I think that what they did is they tried something, they carbon copied a previous contract, they tried that methodology. Now what they're doing is a little bit different and we're getting specific. So they're asking us, what would it take to get here? And it will be more like the Ramco Gherkin where this is specifically what it will pay for, specifically what it costs. The Orlando Health, for example, requires a bus and a new route, where the VA does not. So those 2 funding agreements are totally different. They look nothing like this.
So what?
So hopefully it continues to get better.
So why has this not been this? Why has Citrus Connection not said something before? Why are we at this point of an agreement?
Because they weren't invited to the.
But even though they don't invite you to the table, if you dump something in my lap, I want to know what it's all about.
I think that's the question. No. I mean, I think that's what Commissioner Lindsay is
Yeah, I
driving.
know, but I'm trying to wonder why we have not just asked that question.
You mean earlier?
If you dump it, you dump it in my lap, something City Lakeland or whoever, and it doesn't make sense, it doesn't jive.
500,000 may not be enough, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right.
500,000 may be.
Way too much.
Way too much, yeah.
Right, too much.
In the case of Ramco, it was as Ben said, it was a bus and design us a route.
Mhm.
It wasn't actually here's the route, it was design us a route. And if you remember at the time, at the time, the referendum had failed and the George Jenkins Center of Hope had just opened. And so the alignment was perfect, Commissioner Walker, because we didn't have the money to go there because the referendum failed. We reduced the routes and here comes, to Commissioner Lindsay's point, here's a free $500,000 and it fixed a major problem for the entire city, which was how do we get public transit out to a homeless shelter for families?
As well as the company developing that, just for everybody's information, they were actually required by the city to redevelop the entire intersection before and after I-4, and they were given a choice.
Right.
And it was more cost effective to pay for transit than to do that, so they selected it.
Back to the ransom.
Here we are now.
So what are you gonna do with $100,000 a year for the next 5 years? How are you gonna spend that money?
But we will apply
For the benefit of the payer.
Yeah, for the situation here.
Well, what we can do is what I've been doing with the other 2 upcoming. And to be fair, the city and Chuck especially, the next 2 that are coming has been a much different experience. And we've been much more involved with that. I think it will get better. What we will do is, and what I've had to provide before, I have not prepared today, I did not anticipate this. However, and I can share with you after the board meeting, any of the board members, we'll calculate out that time per our cost per revenue hour, and we can demonstrate at any time. If there's extra funds, then we will continue the service beyond that until such time that the money is gone. We'll do the right thing with the tax dollar. That's what would be my professional recommendation.
Well, I'd just like to track this experiment as it unfolds.
Yeah.
Just to make sure we, it's actually serving the
If there
purpose.
is a rational nexus between the fee exacted and the service provided, if there is no rational nexus, then it's improper.
It's an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the language now.
So, yeah, back to
Yes, so the question would be, this funding agreement really just
gonna save us
is the third step in the process pursuant to the development agreement. It just copies the wording of the development agreement as I quoted, saying that the developer and the district will commit to provide
The services.
So
I move adoption of the resolution and authorize staff to make the necessary edits to comply. So it's not to disrupt what's already been agreed to, but we're over the tail end of this dog being.
Yeah.
and it's subject to approval by the developer. In other words,
Oh, yeah.
If they have to.
Yeah, that's
Take
what-
final
Commissioner Lindsay,
approval.
I think David, from a financial perspective, can address.
If I may, we communicated yesterday, myself and Ben. Typically, we missed an important step in that we did not got the opportunity to cost the services out. And if we use federal and state grants to subsidize those private routes, then we can get in difficulty with our grants. However, given the cost per revenue hour at $117, and the services on the route is already in existence, there's only a minor loop. So the $100,000 is going to be more than the service. But
Exactly my point.
the way how we can justify that is that they did not fund the capital requirement. So we can dedicate those excess funds for capital improvement or bus replacement. So we'll be safe in this one. I'm also talking to Ben and the veterans, and we're going to do the right process to make sure it doesn't happen again.
The veteran site's not going to be paying taxes. It's going to be a government asset. So how are you going to, there is no revenue stream to follow, and the hospital is going to be instant. It'll only be 1 year to get on the tax roll, where this project will be multi-years as the.
But at least we'll know the cost, to what extent we are subsidizing it.
You're exacting fees to incrementally add to a route, and then diverting those revenues to go buy an asset to serve somewhere else. There's no rational mechanism there.
No. What I'm saying is for the short term in this particular incident, we'll be safe. Going forward, we need to quantify it before we commit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before the second and the third.
Correct.
Second, third, fourth.
$100,000 payment.
Exactly.
Okay,
What's
so
your
we have a
bill, right?
motion on the floor. We need a second.
Second.
Any more discussion, Commissioner Walker?
No, this has been a learning situation for.
And again, it would be subject to the revision as to the fact that the 500,000 hasn't been paid and subject to it being executed by the proper party, subject to the approval by the developer.
Yes,
Right, so you put like developer, right?
The payment has been made to escrow.
Yes.
But no,
So the
money's there, just.
developer has met his obligation. This is to authorize the escrow agent to release
Yes,
that first
exactly.
It's all releasing the money.
Yes,
yeah.
and we do have confirmation that I think 200,000 plus has been paid, and I was told the rest of the 500,000 have been paid, but apparently it hasn't. So at least 200 has been paid. So
Well, then
okay,
they're ahead of their
205.
schedule.
we're good.
Well, and I think moving forward, what I hear from my colleagues is that we need to be on the front end of the process with regard to the city.
Sure.
And how, if you need our help from the city of Lakeland standpoint to facilitate that, we certainly can.
Sure.
Well, they're making exactions on our behalf without our input,
Right.
without knowing what the demand really is. It may be too much, it may not be enough. And it's,
Well,
it's a vulnerability of approval.
Well, I'm disappointed here that that's happening. I would think that should not be the case. I'm sure, I would think my colleagues would be the same
Right.
way.
No, so I think we have to work on it from the front end. So this is a really good exercise to see where our weaknesses and vulnerabilities
Sure.
are moving forward and make sure that you have our support, the Citrus Connection LAMTD staff has our support to mitigate this on the front end versus on the back end.
Absolutely.
So, so we have a motion and a second on the floor for this escrow money discussion. Any further discussion, any further questions on that?
No, I was just gonna say exactly what you were gonna say, that we need to be at the forefront of
Yeah.
this whole thing, so we wouldn't have this situation.
Right. All right, thank you for that. I'm glad those questions were brought up. I appreciate the discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
Under agency updates and my ridership updates, all the routes are open, although we're not fully staffed, but just want to remind everyone the routes are open and we've removed the social distancing on the buses, but we are still under the TSA mandate for mask usage. And I'd like to thank Mr. Dunn and his staff for continuing to enforce that. And the enhanced cleaning is continuing on all of the buses. And we're in constant communication with our union representatives to make sure that they have all the cleaning supplies that's needed, and they still have a nominal amount of overtime to be able to clean the buses. I informed the chair and Commissioner Lindsay, because he showed up early for the meeting, of a meeting, normal quarterly meeting with the Florida Department of Transportation. As you know, we received a funding cut to the tune of approximately $818,000 for our Florida Avenue block grant, and approximately $300,000 to our Florida Avenue grant was $818,000. Our block grant for Winter Haven and for Lakeland, because we only received one block grant, were cut to the tune of approximately $300,000, of which half would affect the county's cash match budget. That occurred when the sales tax revenue projections came in from the state. They gave us that cut, and the chair transmitted to FDOT asking for that cut to be formalized. We received a letter that they were in receipt of her letter, but we had not received a formal notification of the cuts. I am informing the board, I asked FDOT staff the question that since the budget was passed and the governor noted that he used the CARES funding to plug the budget deficit and pass the largest budget in Florida state history, did they plug our holes? And if so, are we going to see a restoration of that funding cut? Because it affects not only the Citrus Connection, but it affects what we have to ask the county for every year, and the county has to budget for that as well. And they said they'd get back to us. So we will continue to be very aggressive in seeking that answer, because that is going to affect not only David's budgeting for the Citrus Connection, but also for the county as well. So if they plug that hole and they're keeping our claw back, effectively my position would be that they're double dipping. And so we need to be able to see the restoration of those revenues if they did indeed plug that hole.
And we started this question, I think my letter was dated January?
January sounds about.
Was it before Christmas?
Around that time.
Yes.
It might be wise to inquire of Senator Stargell as the appropriations chair for the Senate,
I can call her.
how those are being treated. She may be learning something too.
I'm happy to call her.
Okay.
What
Thank you.
was the amount again?
$1.1 million. It was
And
a,
it equates exactly to our CARES Act.
yes. So David, correct me if I'm wrong, but it equated to exactly a year of Florida Avenue funding. So an entire year of our most popular route, and $300,000 to the block grant, which when we merged, Commissioner, so prior to the merger, the county received their own block grant and we received ours. But when we merged, and it makes sense, they give us one block grant. But we took that funding cut and shared it equally. So if there's not a restoration of that funding, the budget request to Mr. Bond would be for an additional
1/8.
Yes, but what is FDOT actually did was to reduce our allocation by $140,000 in the current year. But they did not reduce the next year, which is next fiscal year, and they will not comment whether they will or will not. So that's the predicament.
You don't know how to plan. You can't plan.
So we can't plan.
Right.
But however, they haven't reduced it in their allocation.
And they've been asked verbally by me, written by me, and by staff, and since staff had another meeting recently. So it's not like that we haven't inquired on multiple communication levels in multiple ways at multiple timeframes since before Christmas.
All you get is crickets. No answer.
We got the letter.
So they get back.
We'll get back to it.
Yeah.
Verbally, I'll get back to you.
And again, Commissioner Lindsay and board members and chair, these cuts, we were told, were statewide to transit, roads, and airports. So there's this conversation and the cuts should directly also impact the TPO,
all of us.
the county,
Yeah.
and the city, and the airport. Well, at the end of the airport's part of the city, because there were allegedly corresponding cuts across the board.
Yeah, and I asked City of Lakeland staff several 4 or 5 months ago, and they hadn't heard anything either. And I don't know that any cuts were reflected because we even asked our budget meeting.
Okay. Speaking of FDOT, we are working with our FDOT funding partners. James copied you on a letter. We are in a 6-week study. Although the squeeze does not operate on any state roads, Commissioner Walker and I discussed this last week. We are crossing Florida Avenue. Our proposed crossing was at Florida Avenue in Maine. I'd like to thank Paul Sims. We got on a call with our partners at FDOT, and Paul was able to get the traffic count numbers for Orange, Lemon, Lime, and Maine. And I believe we were told that, was it Lemon or Lime?
That Lemon met the threshold.
I thought, yeah, Lemon.
Okay, but that was, from what they said, we still gotta wait for the official answer.
Right, so
Whatever that means.
the traffic
It'll
counts,
be a while.
the traffic counts needed to be under 10,000. And I believe the traffic counts on Lemon were 1,500.
Yeah, that was the threshold, 1,500 per hour, I believe.
Right, so we're well within the threshold.
Right.
But we still need to wait for the official study.
And Lemon was at cross, I thought you told me, so.
Correct, so most likely it will be
I
Lemon.
would think Lemon.
Correct,
It
Mr.
can still be Orange Avenue.
Or,
Oh, it's gonna be orange?
It can still be Orange Avenue.
Really?
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
again, excellent meeting with Fort Meade. They may be adding runs of the bus back. So we will, of course, work with the city of Bartow because that would mean a corresponding reduction in Bartow. The benefit to Bartow with the Fort Meade decision was that Bartow received their longtime Bartow community circulator as a result. So the route would normally leave Bartow, head to Fort Meade. When it didn't go to Fort Meade, Bartow got their circulator. That makes them actually only the second city in Lakeland that has a community circulator. I'm sorry, in Polk County. Lakeland has community circulators and Bartow.
That's awesome.
Winter Haven has a route that does not leave Winter Haven, but it services a very specific area, not the core downtown area. But Steve Giddens, as you know, is on the Bartow Commission, so he should innately understand and help us navigate with the Bartow City Commission how routes work and those types of things. So we're working with them and Commissioner Lindsay. Before our next board meeting, I'll have my Mulberry meeting as well.
You saw my notes?
Yes. Oh, no, I didn't. But, and then finally, I will be on vacation next week. Aaron Dunn will be handling I'll be up in northern Minnesota. Mr. Dunn will be handling any operations issues. Mr. Prasad will be handling everything else. So if you need him, you all are in good hands with the two of them. My track record when I'm out of town is not great. Typically, there's a major fire or earthquake.
Please don't say that.
But the last time I was out of town, they hired James. So,
Yay. Yay.
that was
reverse the trend.
Yeah. So I may be out of pocket as I'm up in northern Minnesota, but if you need anything, you've got the staff that's available as well. And so excited to have, in closing, excited to have the interns here. And then I just would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to tell you a quick story. Commissioner Lindsay, when you brought up the administrative vehicles, my very first board meeting, Commissioner Sam Johnson was on the board. And he said something almost identical to what you said. And I bit and tried to answer the question. So it took me back to my very first board meeting. So thank you. That's the end of my report.
All right. Any other comments from board members? Yes, Commissioner Lindsay.
Is the agency going to get any ARP money, and how much, and what you going to do with it? American Recovery Plan.
The rescue money. The preliminary allocation shows 3.3 million for LAMTD and 2.2 for the county.
And you're developing a plan for what to do with it.
Yes, sir.
We've been given parameters on what you can and can't do with it. And I don't know if they're the same parameters or different parameters for.
Same.
You want to talk about?
We are currently, senior staff is meeting and gathering input on the allocation. Before we can spend those money, it requires board approval. So we're shooting for July, providing we have all the information necessary as to how we can spend. We know what the limitations are. We can recover lost revenues. You can reinstate services. You can't use money for pension. You can't use money to replenish reserve.
Right.
So it's pretty much consistent. So before we do anything, it'll be coming back to the board.
Well, I've told our staff, avoid the temptation of creating services that you're gonna have to give up.
Can't
when the money runs out.
Correct. No new service.
And concentrate on assets and capital improvements.
Yeah.
Now, there may be a little bit that goes in that other direction that we'll have to figure out how to fund when the money runs out, but that would be my guidance.
Anything else? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
That's a second. All in favor? We're out.
Jane, do you have those copies of those? We didn't do